Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of Sirhan on X, live from Cincinnati, Ohio, in the United States. Hope everyone had themselves a wonderful 3-day weekend and a wonderful 3rd of February 2025. Being in February, of course, it is closer to spring, and the weather was actually gorgeous here in Cincinnati. It was in the mid to high 60s, which means the grass is going to get clean, the leaves are going to bloom on the trees, flowers are going to bloom, and it's going to be a beautiful spring. Of course, they had a little thing, I forgot what it was called. They said we're 6 weeks away from spring. Hopefully, it's sooner than that. But let's just sit back and enjoy the weather. Uh, Hope everyone had themselves a wonderful day and weekend. Loads to touch on. Probably one of the more loaded shows I've had in quite some time. The wild stuff over the weekend, reliving a couple of Super Bowl moments and a couple of familiar faces in the world of boxing. Basically, I have everything for everybody because that's how I'm here. See a bunch of new people who follow me on the X platform. Introduce myself, just what I do. Like everyone, everybody has a voice. Everyone has, the podcasting, live streaming, or whatever the frick you want to call it. I, like everybody else, like to bust out a mic and give my own opinion. I just sit back and enjoy it. Shout out to everybody out there. And I'm going to get started here real quick. Of course, still the shockwaves that took place late Saturday night was, of course, what took place in Dallas with the trade of Luka Doncic to the Los Angeles Lakers for Anthony Davis. Of course, there were some pieces in there that sort of, due to how the NBA trade works in terms of financial contractual matches. But of course, this one nobody saw coming. Probably in the history of sports trades and maybe ever, maybe the most shocking, easily. You talk about a guy who's easily a top six player in the NBA and Luka Doncic being traded to the Los Angeles Lakers for an Anthony Davis, who's still a top flight big man. I mean, just to make the phone about it, he's still a pretty sound big man when he's going on. But for this to happen at the time it did and the way it did raises a lot of questions. Let's start with a press conference that took place yesterday in Dallas when their general manager, Nico Garrison, was sitting next to the head coach, Jason Kidd, where Garrison basically said, I traded him because I wanted to trade him. He basically said he didn't tell anybody. He didn't tell anybody within the Mavs organization. He even said he didn't tell Jason Kidd, with Jason Kidd sitting right there next to him. And see the look on Jason Kidd's face as if he didn't know what the hell hit him. I mean, this is how shocking it is. And for Garrison to do that to your star player, you talk about hands down a top six NBA player. I mean, if you have a top six players in the NBA, he's got to be up there. To do that to him and to just do him that dirty speaks volumes as to what is going on. Now, of course, there's an issue with the so-called supermax contracts, which supposedly he was going to get paid in essence of $350 million if he went that route, and that's why Dallas did it. Everybody can make their own assumptions. Of course, there's the play in the NBA Finals against Boston where Luka Doncic basically was an empty stats player. You could probably bring that. Rumors flying around, he ballooned his weight to 270 pounds, also, among many other things. But it does not excuse the fact that you just did dirty probably the most premier player you had in the post-Dirk Nowitzki era, who basically kept your franchise relevant. And for you to do him dirty like that speaks volumes to what Nico Garrison is at the end of the day, just a bona fide coward who basically just went all spineless and basically just pulled one of the all-time backstabber moves you could probably see. Just to not even talk about it with anybody within the organization, and you openly admit it. It's not the fact he didn't talk about it. He openly admitted it, openly, with his head coach, Jason Kidd, sitting next to him, saying, nope, I didn't talk to anyone. I just did it. Do you know how pathetic Nico Garrison looks right now with that press conference, conducting himself like one of the biggest cowards with that sort of act? Isn't that the equivalent of management and subordination in the workplace? I mean, you don't even acknowledge what the problem is. You don't even talk to the guy. I mean, the only thing you did was just flunk the idea of trading him to the Lakers. You actually just flunked to Rob Pelinka, who's supposedly the Lakers general manager. And at the end of the day, it's just an overall dirty look. And Luka Doncic was done dirty. I mean, it was so shocking. I mean, people thought the originator of this Shams Cardinia, I can't even pronounce his name, were accusing his account of being hacked on the X platform. Even Bucks head coach Doc Rivers said he thought the whole thing was the AI, artificial intelligence or whatever the frick you want to call it. But it was one of the most despicable things I've ever seen, to simply go behind your superstar's back in a power and it was now the player empowerment NBA. To do that behind him speaks volumes to the character that is lacking when you talk about Nico Garrison, the general manager of Dallas. Bigger question is, where the hell is Mark Cuban? I mean, did he sign off on this? I mean, right now he's too busy being a political hack, trying to go at the current president, Donald Trump, for whatever reason, while ignoring his real responsibility by just letting this thing slide. How do you let a generational talent, a top 6 player in the NBA right now, who kept your franchise relevant after Dirk Nowitzki retired, and you pull this off? There's more questions that need to be answered, but the problem is Nico Garrison just doesn't have the courage or the balls to answer any of them right now, because that's who he is at the end of the day. And as far as how this is going to work out on the basketball part of it, I believe he was been out for a while with some kind of a strained calf, and they're talking about him probably coming back Saturday. The dynamic of him and LeBron and LA is going to be absolutely weird, because both guys are ball dominant and rely on floor spacing, and the Lakers don't have that. And the Lakers gave up their top rim protector, and Anthony Davis, who's still a top flight rim protector in the NBA, despite all the injuries he's dealt with in his career. Now they're going to have to look for a big man to rim protect, and the spacing is going to be lacking. From the Dallas's point of view, I mean, if Anthony Davis is still Anthony Davis, I mean, it's still going to work out. Bigger question I have is, how the hell are you going to get one first-round draft pick out of this if you're Dallas? The Brooklyn Nets got more out of Mikal Bridges than Dallas got out of Luka Doncic. Hell, the San Antonio Spurs got more out of DeJounte Murray 3 years ago than Dallas got out of Luka Doncic. Do you know how pathetically moronic Dallas looks right now, and how embarrassingly bad they do? To simply take your franchise guy, probably a top 5, top 6 player in the NBA, throw him under the bus blatantly, send him out without even saying a word to him. Basically, you just telling the guy you're fired telling the guy you're fired out of the job without even disciplining him or reprimanding him. It's just overall bad look. And Jason Kidd's reaction when Nico Garrison was talking during this entire press conference, saying exactly what he said, makes it look worse for Nico Garrison at the end of the day. There's going to be more questions on this. I'm sure it's going to come up. And there's going to be lots of real-time serious answers. Hard for it to come through right now, because there's still the shock effect that took place over the weekend in the middle of the night when this happened. I mean, not even a Adrian Wojnarowski Woj bomb would compare to this. I mean, this is probably like 50 Woj bombs in the middle of the night. Good luck trying to repair yourself, because what's going to happen is the Dallas fan base is going to turn away, walk away. You're going to be winding up playing in empty arenas, and because of how it was done, the Dallas Mavericks is going to have a hard time getting top draft picks and free agents to play for them, and to sign free agents to play for them. And if I'm Jason Kidd, I'm crafting up my resignation paper right now, because I'm not sure I want to work for a guy like that. This is ridiculously embarrassing. We'll see what happens down the line. And the other trade that took place in a more lighter note, probably more fun note, it was De'Aaron Fox in a 3-team deal going from Sacramento to the San Antonio Spurs. Looks like they're trying to build another multi-title run like they had during the Tim Duncan, Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili era. Of course, you have Wemby, and you had De'Aaron Fox. Of course, you have the other guys in there: Stephon Castle, Devin Vassell, Keldon Johnson. Of course, the veterans Harrison Barnes and Chris Paul. A three-level score next to Wemby is what the doctor ordered for the Spurs, and the fact they didn't even have to give up one of their many pick swaps they have, they basically got a steal out of this. I mean, they needed a marquee playmaker, because Chris Paul, Chris Paul is what, like 50 right now? I lost track of him when he was 40, but still an efficient passer. How much longer can he keep up? It's time for the Spurs to start to put the team around Wemby that they used to with guys like David Robinson and Tim Duncan. I mean, it's now time. I mean, Wemby showed what he's capable of. You drafted Stephon Castle, stand out big. Of course, the guys you already have on that roster. I mean, you got rid of Zach Collins, who's basically a waste of a roster spot. And of course, Greg Popovich is supposed to be back soon from as a stroke. Things are now looking up again in San Antonio. And then I remind you, they have the next 7 years, they have at least 6 first-round draft picks and another 3 more they could swap. Things are looking rosy at the end of the 2020s for the Spurs. I never thought I would say that, given they were the team of the 2000s. Of course, they had the revenge in 2014 after losing to Miami to get their payback to win the title. Things are looking real bloomy in San Antonio right now. And we have a generation talent like Wemby. You better start building, and I think they're ready to make the move. Kudos to the general manager, Brian Wright, for playing this thing almost to perfection. I mean, that's what he did at the end of the day. And speaking of the Spurs, over the weekend and at the end of the game between the Spurs and the Bucks, one of the most wildest things I ever seen. You're talking about a superstar in Giannis Antetokounmpo, who's 7'1", over 260 pounds, trying to pick a fight with a 40-year-old Chris Paul, who's 6 foot and like 180 pounds. I guess they got into a mix-up at the end of the game. Giannis basically just started saying, I'm going to bleep you up. I'm going to mess you up, pointed directly at Chris Paul. And Chris Paul basically said, you're nothing. You're not going to do anything. There's a whole verbiage on the X platform. You guys can read it. But here's the thing. You're Giannis Antetokounmpo. You're a top 5 player in the NBA. You're 7'1". Why the heck are you messing with a guy who's 40 years old and basically 6 foot and is on his close to his end of the NBA? Now, mind you, this guy ran Adrian Griffin out of town like 2 seasons ago, and it hasn't panned out for him ever since. The guy's basically been irrelevant ever since he won his NBA title in 2021. Of course, 2-time MVP and I think Defensive Player of the Year on top of it. He's borderline entering the irrelevant territory right now. And for him to act like this, and the worst part was after the game, he stands at midcourt and basically just calls Chris Paul out. And Chris Paul says, you're not going to do anything, and smartly leaves. Remember to Giannis Antetokounmpo. You're 7'1", and you're messing with a 6 foot point guard. Spare me your fake tough guy act, because I'm not entertaining it. Because I've tried to be a fan of yours. Of course, you had that weird press conference after you lost to Miami a couple years ago where you just try to explain how you lost and try to justify losing to an 8 seed. Basically, it was a Miami team who just backed into the playoffs, and you let them beat you in one of the most bizarre press conferences ever. And I remind you, don't forget about the incident in the bubble where you headbutted a Washington Wizards player. And of course, when Isaiah Stewart pulled up on you, you chickened out. Spare me your fake tough guy act, Giannis. Do better than this. You're a top 5 player in the NBA also. Be better. Never thought I would open the show with NBA talk because I haven't followed the NBA in quite some time. But being a Spurs fan, I have a little juice going on after the De'Aaron Fox trade. So I might be joining you guys down there at the Alamo for the Silver and Black here soon. I might take my show out there also. Now to the NFL. And a boatload of topics and a boatload. Of course, the news broke earlier today. Myles Garrett requested a trade from the Cleveland Browns. I told you guys in the Northeast 3 years ago, this was going to be the result when you signed that quarterback to the fully guaranteed contract of $230 million. I told you that 3 years ago. You can pull it up. You can pull up the audio footage. You can put up my posts. You can pull up my newspaper writings. You can put up my pen and paper writings. I told you 3 years ago this was going to be the result. You thought signing Deshaun Watson to that fully guaranteed contract was going to run Lamar Jackson out of Baltimore. It was going to run Joe Burrow out of Cincinnati, and he was going to be the cream of the crop in the AFC North. You guys ran Amari Cooper out in the season, and now it's like you're going to run Myles Garrett out. It's the salary cap, and when you sign someone to a ridiculous contract like that, it's going to have a ricochet effect, and it's not going to look good for you guys at the end of the day. You guys, for the longest time, talked about being the team to beat in the AFC North, trying to be the imaginary AFC North champs for the last 3 years since you got Deshaun Watson from Houston. Newsflash, you missed the playoffs the first year. You made the playoffs the second year largely because Cincinnati just fell off the rails and Pittsburgh was gift wrapped in appearance. And what happens? You go into Houston and you get punked on Houston's field. Go into this season, bad start, and you just couldn't get the job done. I'm sorry. I'm not sorry because you guys are getting exactly what you deserve in Cleveland right now. Now you guys want to file a protest on the Cleveland ownership for after this particular trade request by Myles Garrett. Good luck. You're not getting anything done. You made that bed when you picked up Deshaun Watson 3 years ago and threw Baker Mayfield under the bus. Now, guess what? Shut your mouth and go lie in that bed you made because that's what you deserve right now. You let a franchise player, a premier all-time edge rusher, request a trade, and it's been because of the after effect of what happened when you guys picked up Deshaun Watson 3 years ago. And I told you then, and I'll say it again, this was going to be the result. You made your bed, shut your mouths, and go lie in it. Because you guys are officially irrelevant. Unless you want to try and tank for Archie Manning in 2026, I don't know what that's going to do you. You guys going to get Cam Ward this season? Good luck. And there's a reason why Baltimore, Cincinnati, and Pittsburgh is having their way with you right now in that division. And speaking of the AFC North, of course, it was over the weekend that over here in Cincinnati, the news was the contract issues with Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Trey Hendrickson. Standout quarterback Joe Burrow says he expects deals to get done. I expect the Jamar Chase deal to get done, which I think is 1 year too late because they should have got it done before the start of last season. Now his value has gone up. Higgins is a tricky proposition. They could probably restructure Hendrickson's contract another year to where he's getting some extra dollars, extended a year probably. I expect at least two of those guys. I know at least Chase and Hendrickson to be on the team next season. T. Higgins is up in the air. Everyone says it's doable because we have morons in Cincinnati who are stupid enough to think they know how the salary cap works when they don't. You know Joe Burrow's cap hit this season, next season is $46.5 million. That's something everybody misses. And you're going to try to rely on the draft to fill your needs, which is basically offensive linemen, which you can't even protect. Couldn't even protect a statue. A defensive front who just got ran on the last couple of years, and your secondary needs remade, and you basically traded a draft pick to get a fourth string running back out of Chicago. Congratulations, you played yourselves again, because you're going to need more than just those three guys to try and get yourselves back into the playoff picture. You have holes all over the place, and unless you have someone who has financial expertise in terms of how to work the NFL salary cap, you're going to have to sacrifice something because you need help all over the place. Because your history of drafting players hasn't been good outside of drafting Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase over the last several seasons. I mean, that's all it is. I mean, you need guards because Alex Kappa just got dog walked last season. Same with Cordell Volson, and all 10 and the entire defense. You keep Trey Hendrickson. You tell the other 10 guys to get out. You guys don't even want to do that. That's where the problem lies. You guys are trying to hold on to something that you think is going to work. You've held on to this 2 years too late, and now you guys are behind the 8 ball again. I wish you good luck in the 2025 season, off season, excuse me, because I'll be dealing with you guys more and more on this. I said I'm going to avoid talking about local stuff because I don't want to be a homer. I'm never a homer, but it has to be brought up. Of course, today was the press conference of Roger Goodell. And the topic was, of course, again, the thing that everybody in Buffalo and Cincinnati, being the morons that they are in both cities respectively, want to talk about how the refs rigged games for Chiefs. And Roger Goodell says it was just a stupid suggestion, which he's right. But I have one problem with this. 90% of these journalists and media guys, especially morons like Kelsey Conway and Chris Bowling, just to name two of these cowards, didn't have the courage to press the issue of refs right down Roger Goodell's throat when they had the chance to. Because all throughout the season and all throughout the playoffs, you see it on the platforms, you see it on ESPN, you see it on all of this, where everyone's pinpointing bad calls by the refs, or at least on the perception-wise, rigging the games for the Chiefs. And of course, the issue of how good or bad referees are. Morons like Kelsey Conway, Chris Bowling, among many others, dropped the ball. I said, if you didn't press the issue on the refs down Roger Goodell's throat, you guys are just moronic cowards, and that's what you guys are at the end of the day. If you want answers about how refereeing works, there was a chance to do it, and you blew it. Of course, Roger Goodell is probably not going to tell you the truth because that's who Roger Goodell is. But for you not to bring any heat, to bring no heat in that presser, from any journalist, it doesn't matter who it is, to basically let Roger Goodell off the hook after he gave that answer, speaks volumes as to what these journalists are. Of course, there's two of them here in Cincinnati, Kelsey Conway and Chris Rowling, just to name two of them, and they dropped the ball. If you really want to answer to how the refs work, you would be down Roger Goodell's throat instead of taking it on the apps, taking it out on people like myself, and taking it out on everybody else. You had your chance in New Orleans to basically push this issue down Roger Goodell's throat, and you let him off the hook. I heard a podcast last week from one of my guys in the Midwest. His name is Farazin Fuzugian. Spot on, and I'm going to double down on what he said. These guys are just gutless by letting him off the hook because that's what happened. If you're going to come out here and make a statement about something like that, and we got a chance to confront it, and you don't push it down their throat, you're a coward. That's Kelsey Conway. That's Chris Rowling. And that's anybody else in that room in New Orleans that day, today, when Roger Goodell was there. You had your chance to push the envelope down their throats. You guys tucked the tail between your legs and backpedaled. Congratulations. You guys are just not even worth talking about anymore after that. And anybody who wants to bring more referees conversations and not me, you're going to get it with both barrels. Sorry. Actually, I'm not sorry because you had a chance and you blew it. And speaking of the Super Bowl, everybody talks about the legacies of players, Mahomes, Jalen Hurts, Saquon Barkley, the list goes on and on. Maybe what's not talked about enough is the head coach of the Kansas City Chiefs, Andy Reid. Interesting stat I read the other day was he's not just the winningest coach in Kansas City history with 161 wins if you count the postseason, also the winningest coach in Philadelphia history still with 140. I mean, a lot of fans of both Philadelphia and Kansas have some weird takes in and out sometimes, but the man can coach. I mean, the guy's coached 301 wins in his career. He's done something right. He wins a Super Bowl here. We're talking about the ultra upper echelon of GOAT coaches to ever come out of the NFL. We're talking about, of course, Bill Belichick, Don Shula, Bill Walsh. Of course, going way back to a guy like Vince Lombardi, just to name several of them. Andy Reid's going to be in that conversation. I mean, you can say what you want. I know there's issues in Philly whether he could get over the hump. The one time he did was 2004, but they ran into the New England Patriots dynasty, and that was all she wrote for that. But Andy Reid, if he manages to pull this off Sunday, and he's got a real good shot at it, you're talking about an ultra great coach and an upper tier of great NFL coaches to ever walk the sidelines of the gridiron. Interesting that this guy's still the winningest coach in Philadelphia history. And given how they've had turnover in few years and how sometimes people call for Nick Sirianni's head, I'd be surprised if that record is ever going to be touched over there. Certainly not going to be touched here in Kansas City. I'll just leave it at that. But a shot at history, and he's got a real shot at it. The man can coach. Give the guys due a little bit. Now, with it being Super Bowl weekend, we get all the historic Super Bowls on the networks, the podcasts, the streaming sites, the social media sites. Maybe two of my favorite edge of your seat Super Bowls took place about, I think it was like maybe about 6.5 years, maybe 7 years apart. First one was 2008, the Super Bowl 43 between the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Arizona Cardinals. The story here, of course, Arizona gets in with a 9-7 record, wins the NFC West at a time when the NFC West was a laughingstock of the division. Basically shocked the world just to get to the Super Bowl because they were basically the underdog in every game they played in, going against the mighty Pittsburgh Steelers, led by Ben Roethlisberger and one of the standout defenses in NFL history. probably one of the better Super Bowls at the time. I mean, no one could foresee this coming. Looked like Pittsburgh was going to pull away early. Arizona forces a turnover. They score a touchdown. And of course, the end of the half where Kurt Warner throws a pass right to James Harrison, and he goes back 99 yards for a touchdown. Where you look like he was watching a guy walk to a touchdown as if he was walking in slow motion, because the guy wasn't even running much, and nobody could even tackle the guy. 99 yards down the sideline. And of course, the wild fourth quarter where the touchdown by Pittsburgh, Arizona comes back. Kurt Warner hits Larry Fitzgerald on an underneath route. He takes it to the house. Looked like Arizona was going to win it, and basically the place there was going nuts. Till of course Pittsburgh had the final drive. The capper was Ben Roethlisberger rolling out to the parquet, hitting Santonio Holmes at the sideline for the game-winning touchdown. Of course, there's always this hot debate whether he caught it or not. Every replay showed he did. Caught, two toes on the sideline. Game over. Pittsburgh wins the Super Bowl. But that was one of the more exciting Super Bowls I've seen maybe ever. Of course, neither team's come close to reaching that level ever again. Of course, Pittsburgh went to the Super Bowl in 2010, lost to Green Bay, thanks in large part to the Rashad Mendenhall fumble. But everyone pinpoints the Santonio Holmes catch as to why that game was won. Maybe look back at the end of the half, the pick six by James Harrison to end the first half. I've said all along, when you talk about games in the whole totality, people want to focus on the end of the game or one play at the end. Look at the whole totality and look at the play. Maybe look at the plays that matter most throughout the totality. That pick six by James Harrison, you could argue was the real winner. The Santonio, of course, Arizona did come back, but of course, countered by Santonio Holmes. But that was all she wrote. The pick six, I thought, was the difference. Arizona, of course, he went to the NFC title. I think it's 2015 under Carson Palmer, but they've been sort of ever since. Sort of have a decent bounce back this season, but that's about it. Of course, everybody in Pittsburgh wants to see, given their historical tradition, go back to the Super Bowl, but looks like that's not going to happen anytime soon, despite the standout record of the head coach Mike Tomlin. And of course, the other one, and we know how this one ended, and there's still people asking questions about it today. It was the New England Patriots coming from behind over the Seattle Seahawks. We know the story here. Russell down the stretch, Russell Wilson hits that crazy pass to Jermaine Kearse, and it looks like Seattle's going to drive for the game-winning touchdown. 2 plays later, Wilson tries to hit Ricardo Lockett in the end zone, picked off by Malcolm Butler. New England wins the Super Bowl for the first time in a decade. Of course, everybody knows what this is about. Why didn't you give the ball to Marshawn Lynch? True. But I caution people one thing. Seattle had this game under control going into the fourth quarter with a 2-possession game, and they let New England in back into it. Everyone's going to point to that particular situation, rightfully so, understandably so. But how about the fact that Seattle had this game under control going into the fourth quarter with a 10-point lead, and one of the premier defenses we talk about, the Legion of Boom. That 11-man roster, especially the back end of the secondary, led by guys like Richard Sherman and Earl Thomas III, couldn't even corral or slow down Tom Brady, the New England Patriots, with a 10-point lead. That's something I still can't comprehend. Of course, we know what happened with the last play of the game with the interception of Malcolm Butler. Everybody talks about the should they hand it off to Marshawn Lynch? Of course, Pete Carroll defended his quarterback for the longest time. Maybe the most poignant moment in that game on that play was when they showed Richard Sherman's face when that happened. He had that look of disgust, and he's still rigging Russell Wilson to this day for that play. He did not too long ago on his podcast. But for this Super Bowl, it's poignant because we're not. People are questioning whether Tom Brady was going to ever get back and win a Super Bowl, especially after what happened in 2007 with his New England Patriots played to perfection and lost to the Eli Manning-led New York Giants. And of course, there's the perception that when Malcolm Butler picked off Russell Wilson in the end zone or wherever the hell wound up being, that it saved Tom Brady's legacy. Tom Brady's legacy was intact at that point. I mean, GOAT, have at it. I don't partake in GOAT conversations because I've always said I'll be biased toward Jordan Montana. But, for a whole decade, the New England Patriots, people forget, they had 2 Super Bowl appearances and 2 losses in 07 and 2012 to the Eli Manning-led New York Giants. There was issues whether they could ever get back there and actually win it. I mean, they did on this day. I mean, Malcolm Butler saved a lot from the New England perspective. Now, of course, for the Seattle perspective, that was all she wrote here. The salary cap became a problem. Guys getting suspended for Adderall. Marshawn Lynch was on his last legs. They tried to divert the offensive for Russell Wilson. That didn't work. Legion of Boom started declining and parting ways. They never went back. But it was a hell of a Super Bowl also. And, the end is always going to be talked about. Should they have given Marshawn Lynch the ball? I mean, it's easy to say. I thought they should have. And I thought they would have, because we think about what happened 2 plays before when Russell Wilson hit Jermaine Kearse on that long pass that Kearse had made a miraculous catch on. The New England Patriots defense started reeling. I mean, they were reeling. 2 plays later, of course, the interception by Malcolm Butler. The play as a whole, I don't know what they were thinking, why they would try to go at Ricardo Lockett in a simple slant route when Malcolm Butler was basically watching Russell Wilson the entire time. Makes you wonder what Russell Wilson was seeing on that field. Of course, he should have given it to Marshawn Lynch. We all know this. But a great Super Bowl that was. Of course, it sparked a run of 4 Super Bowl appearances in 5 years for the Patriots, managing to win 3, beating Atlanta after being down 28-3, the capper in 2018 when they beat the Rams. But a 6 Super Bowl run. Say what you want about it. Dissect it all you want. Great run. So that takes care of my NFL segment. And I'll probably talking about more tomorrow and the day after, because, of course, we're approaching Super Bowl week. This week, I will give my official prediction. Now to a couple remembrances in the world of boxing. And no, I'm not giving the Canelo-Jake Paul fight the time of day because it's not worth it. It was a decade ago today where the sport lost one of the premier figures in boxing history, the standout trainer Angelo Dundee. I mean, a trainer, like Manuel Stewart, a trainer, father figure, a motivator. He knew the right buttons to push at the right moments. Maybe the best one that describes him was the first fight between Sugar Ray Leonard and Thomas Hearns, September 16, 1981, when Leonard, with his eyes swollen, behind on the scorecards, basically sitting in the corner, Angelo Dundee just letting him know, you're blowing it, son. You're blowing it. And, of course, that lit a fire to Sugar Ray Leonard to stop Thomas Hearns in the 14th round to win the undisputed welterweight championship of the world. But Angelo Dundee, his laundry list is through the roof. I mean, of course, he trained the greatest of all time, Muhammad Ali, transitioned into Sugar Ray Leonard. Before that, he trained Carmen Basilio to upset Sugar Ray Robinson in 1957. And what people don't remember, he was in George Foreman's corner in 1994 when he upset Michael Moore to win the heavyweight title. Not just a great trainer, a great teacher, a terrific motivator who knew the buttons to push at the right time. Trained a bunch of other fighters in there, like a Michael Nunn was one of them. Maybe the last one he had was a fighter named John Duddy. They trained Pinklon Thomas for a while, just to name a few of them. But his standouts were still Carmen Basilio, Muhammad Ali, Sugar Ray Leonard, and George Foreman. Crazy thing about him training George Foreman was he was at Muhammad Ali's corner when Ali beat Foreman in Rumble in the Jungle. 20 years later, he goes into Foreman's corner, and Foreman beat Michael Moore to win the heavyweight title. Standout trainer, standout motivator, knew the right things to say at the right time, and that's what made Angelo Dundee an all-time great. May God rest his soul. And another guy that was not talked about enough, we talk about the power play promoters, is the late Dan Duva. At a time when Don King and Bob Arum ruled the sport, Dan Duva was trying to make his mark carve his niche in the sport. The son of the standout trainer Lou Duva, part of the main events banner that had fighters like Evander Holyfield, Pernell Whitaker, Mildred Taylor, Rocky Lockridge, Mark Breland, just to name a few. Dan Duva went to bat for his guys and basically wanted all the big fights, despite what his differences were both Don King and Bob Arum. I mean, there were times because of his approach to the sport, his feuds with King and Arum were as bad as the Hatfields and the McCoys. They were that bad. And Dan Duva pushed and pushed to get the fights he wanted. He tried to get the Evander Holyfield and Mike Tyson fight once in 1990. Mike Tyson lost to Buster Douglas. Try to get it again in 1991. It was set in schedule, but Mike Tyson faked a rib injury to avoid Evander Holyfield. Don't blame Dan Duva for that. He wanted the fight. He tried to push for the fight, and it never turned out at the time. And of course, he got the real super fight he wanted in 1993 between Pernell Whitaker and Julio Cesar Chavez, put his differences aside with Don King to get that super fight made, which sold out 65,000 in the Alamo Dome. But Dan Duva was a promoter who had this chip on his shoulder, wanted to make his mark on the sport the way Don King and Bob Arum did at a time when promoter power play was the king of the crop. It was unfortunate that near 20 years ago, he succumbed to a brain tumor, and at a very young age, and basically that was it for him. Basically, it was near the tail end of the main events banner. They still had good fights. I mean, he still promoted Pernell Whitaker, but Dan Duva was the driving force of the main events promotion, especially when you consider a handful of guys that came out of the 1984 Olympics. He promoted them and guided them to big heights and big fights. May God rest his soul. And of course, the standout fight that took place near 20 years ago. I got a comment here. I don't know. I can't even pronounce your name, but I guess you're Turkish. I'll talk to you later. This was a fight that took place. Actually, check that back. It took place. Trying to think here. 29 years ago at the Great Western Forum in Los Angeles. It was Marco Antonio Barrera and Kennedy McKinney. Stellar fight, but for all you fight fans, this was an introduction to one of the premier boxing programs of all time, HBO Boxing After Dark. It made its debut on this night. Part of a doubleheader with Johnny Tapia, but this fight had the goods. I mean, Marco Antonio Barrera, part of the deep traditions of great fighters in Mexico, looking to carve his niche, especially with the decline of Julio Cesar Chavez and Ricardo Lopez still at the top level. Want to make his name on the mark. Fighting the rugged journeyman Kennedy McKinney, who was a former two-time champion in those super junior featherweight, super bantamweight classes. Classic fight, good action back and forth. Barrera just showed why he was the next level. Floored McKinney 4 times. Actually, McKinney came back to floor Barrera himself, but it was the 12th round where Barrera got the stoppage win. I think it was something like 45-0 at that point. And he was considered, because of his big record, the second coming of Julio Cesar Chavez, and turned out to have a very stellar career in those weight classes. We talk about the great Mexican fighters. Maybe he doesn't get to the top level, but he did definitely in the middle of the pack. Like the top 6, top 7 all-time great Mexican fighter was Barrera, known, of course, for the terrific trilogy with Eric Morales. Great trilogy, must watch. Show the whole world he was more than just a brawler that had boxing ability when he gave Prince Nassim Hamed a boxing lesson. And went on to win a world title 130 by beating the standout Robbie Peden. Had a great fight with Juan Manuel Marquez. Didn't duck anyone. A golden era when the featherweight division from the back end of the 90s to the mid-2000s was hot, and Marco Antonio Barrera was a standout. Maybe you could argue was the best of the bunch. Had the biggest win when he schooled Prince Nassim Hamed, and escalated himself to that great Mexican fighters. Got the second win over Eric Morales. Later on, got the third win over Eric Morales to conclude the trilogy where he won 2-1. But just a terrific featherweight, junior lightweight. One of the premier all-time greats. Rightfully in the Boxing Hall of Fame. A top 10 all-time great Mexican fighter. 29 years ago today, him and Kennedy McKinney put on a show at the Great Western Forum in Los Angeles. And that was when the world was introduced to one of the killer programs for fight fans like to have. And that was HBO Boxing After Dark. Still a program that ran for the better half of, I want to say it was 22 years till its end. Great fights. Note, of course, Boxing After Dark had the Gaddy War trilogy, among many others. Introduced us to a bunch of young guys like David Tua was on that network, a standout young heavyweight. Chris Burr fought a few times, another standout heavyweight, Ike Beabuchi. Who can forget that fight in '98 between Ike Beabuchi and David Tua? 1,000 punches thrown apiece at the heavyweight division. Great program that ran for a great time. Basically, just two guys who just wanted to go, and that's what you got on HBO Boxing After Dark. That's why they called it HBO bad. It certainly was bad during that time, and I mean bad in a good way. Boy, I wish HBO actually came back today, because I do miss it. It's a standout performance for 22 years. Lots of exciting fights, lots of thrills, lots of chills. Actually, the first of the Morales Barrera trilogy was live on HBO Boxing After Dark, which was just a phenomenal fight. I mean, if I'm correct, I think that was a fight of the year in 2000. Round 5 was probably the round of the year where 1 minute looked like Morales was going to get knocked out. Then he comes back. Barrera gets hurt. What a terrific fight. What a terrific trilogy, Barrera Morales. What a terrific program, HBO Boxing After Dark. HBO, you should have never left, because now we're struck with trying to find ways to watch fights from the bottom barrel, because you were the premier network for the better half of 4.5 decades. I mean, you started off with, back then it was called, excuse me, home box office boxing, when George Foreman fought Joe Frazier in 1973. Kept devoted to the early 1980 to HBO World Championship Boxing. That, of course, ran for 16 years. And, of course, Boxing After Dark came on. Of course, there was KO Nation for a while, which I didn't think it was the greatest program of the world. But HBO Boxing, we sure miss you. Thanks for all the memories. Some of the ultra super fights of our time was on the HBO networks. I mean, think about it. Foreman Frazier, Leonard Hearns 1, Leonard Hearns 2, the replay version, Leonard Hagler, Holmes Cooney, Chavez Taylor, Tyson Douglas, the Holyfield Bowe trilogy, De La Hoya Chavez, De La Hoya Trinidad, and the list goes on and on and on and on and on and on. Boy, I wish somebody could find a way to bring HBO back. I mean, if I have to be a stakeholder, I'll do it. Oh, I miss the good old days. I really do. And that'll wrap up this edition of Sirhan on X. I hope everyone out there has themselves a wonderful rest of the 3rd of February 2025. I got a busy schedule for the rest of the week when it comes to all this stuff. I got 3 shows tomorrow. You got to talk with the Boxing Bug, the boxing series about Aaron Pryor. Of course, Sirhan on X tomorrow night at 7:30 Eastern. Got another one. Of course, after that, I got to do a Spaces. Actually, check that. It was 6:30. Then I'm going to do the Spaces. Wednesday, I got a couple. Thursday, I got a couple. But an early program reminder. A week from tomorrow, February 11th, a 1-hour edition of Sirhan on X will be given a tribute to the greatest upset in boxing history. I'm sure everybody knows what that is, especially in the fight game. And I'm not going to make up any apologies for what I am about to say next Tuesday night. I'm preparing for it right now. I think you guys should too. Until then, hope everyone had themselves a wonderful night. As always, always, make self-care your number one priority. Take care of yourself first before you take care of anything else. Because if you don't take care of yourself first, nothing else matters. Have a good night. Take care, and God bless.